The year 2024 will be marked by a flurry of elections across the globe, each carrying significant weight in shaping the future trajectory of their respective countries and, to some extent, the world at large. Among these pivotal elections, Britain's upcoming general election stands out as a crucial turning point, especially in the context of post-Brexit recovery efforts. The aftermath of Brexit, compounded by the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic and geopolitical tensions such as the Russia-Ukraine war, has left the United Kingdom grappling with economic instability and political turmoil. Against this backdrop, the forthcoming general election holds immense significance in determining the course of the nation's recovery. As the Labour Party emerges as the frontrunner with a substantial lead in the polls, the prospect of a change in government raises hopes for a fresh approach to addressing the country's pressing issues. However, the road ahead remains fraught with challenges, given the deep-rooted political dysfunction and the enduring legacy of Brexit. The decision to leave the European Union, touted by Brexiteers as a pathway to renewed sovereignty and economic prosperity, has instead led to a series of setbacks for the UK economy. Plummeting exports, sluggish growth, diminished productivity, and strained public finances underscore the urgent need to confront the catastrophic consequences of Brexit. Hopes held by many that Brexit would be an issue in the next general election have been dashed after the Liberal Democratic leader Sir Ed Davey told the BBC that any work to undo the Brexit imposed by Boris Johnson would now have to wait until at least the next Parliament in 5 years' time. The Tory position remains vehemently anti-EU, with all the would-be successors to Rishi Sunak sounding more Europhobe than Nigel Farage or Richard Tice. Labour's line was laid down 2 years ago by Sir Keir Starmer when he ruled out any return to the single market, customs union or free movement and used the slogan "Make Brexit Work," though with any explanation of how this happy state might be achieved. Labour shadow ministers studiously avoid the B word, and it suits both the Tories and Labour to make the election the first in half a century in which Europe is not an issue. Some argue that this defies economic gravity. Goldman Sachs last month noted that the UK economy has shrunk 5% since their entry into the hard Brexit era, and the Office for Budget Responsibility put the reduction in GDP at 4%. In her May's lecture, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves denounced what she called a rushed and ill-conceived Brexit deal. But there are no proposals from Labour to restore lost trade with Europe, let alone the lost sovereign rights that British citizens have been deprived of by the extremist Tory and UKIP and Reform idea of a suitable relationship between Britain and Europe. And this leaves a vacuum. No party is speaking for the 49% of the British voters who did not vote for Brexit on that day. Peter Kellner, one of the UK's more distinguished pollsters, makes the somewhat tongue-in-cheek argument that well over 1 million of the 17.4 million Leave voters have died since 2016, so the Remain camp is now in a theoretical majority. But no one in the general elections other than Greens and the SNP will speak for them. The UK Lib Dem parliamentary candidates have put out literature saying their party is the party of Rejoin, while Davey launched a Lib Dem campaign last week and proclaimed that the Lib Dems were on the path to the single market. Being on a path is a meaningless slogan. Given Davey was in the cabinet that green-lighted in 2013 David Cameron's referendum decision, which led to Britain's new posture of unsplendid isolation from Europe, well, perhaps he does not want to admit that Nick Clegg's supine poodle-like acceptance of whatever Cameron proposed during the 2010-15 coalition was an historic mistake. But David did use the rejoin word. He was put further on the spot when Katja Adler, presenting BBC Radio's 4's Today programme, quizzed the Lib Dem leader about the confusion and contradictions in his stance. Adler is the first Today presenter who is an expert on the EU, speaks European languages, and as the BBC's Europe correspondent, knows the mood in EU capitals as well as Brussels. She told the Lib Dem leader firmly there was no interest anywhere in Europe in reincorporating a Britain that has made such a mess of Brexit. British hopes of cherry-picking some future friendlier trade deal with the EU while repudiating most of the conditions of the single market won't work. She's a smart woman. Accepting EU law on trade and related European Court of Justice rulings, lifting the restrictions on Europeans working in the UK, and dropping the xenophobic anti-European hostility, which has been at the heart of Tory policy on Europe since 2016, were all preconditions for a new win-win relationship with Europe. And Davy spluttered but had little to say. He talked of a chat he had with Christian Lindner, the leader of the German Free Democrats, who is currently Germany's finance minister in the coalition government, and probably not in the next parliament, by the way. And German liberals are not soft and cuddly English liberal Democrats, though. They are Manchester liberals, firmly right-wing, hostile to any state intervention, regard Bidenomics and any hint of Keynesian deficit spending as heresy. And Lindner supported Putin's annexation of Crimea and has been voting in the European Parliament and Council of Ministers against EU support for pro-environment and carbon reduction policies. The pretense that the Lib Dems could be the Rejoin party in the general election is shattered, though. Davy is on the same page as Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. British voters will have no choice on Europe in the general election, and probably not this decade. The British Tories have never recovered from the scandalous time in office of the chaotic Prime Minister Boris Johnson, or even worse, Liz Truss. And Rishi Sunak, in office since October 22, has also failed to get the party out of the bottom of the polls. And many British voters perceive the ex-banker and frequent flyer as aloof and unimaginative. And not even a small right-wing populist party is threatening to overtake the Tories. And according to a current YouGov survey, Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party, is now only 4 percentage points behind the Conservative Party. And accordingly, Reform UK would currently receive 14 to 15% of the vote in a general election. The Tories would be at 19, and Labour would win the election with a landslide of 44%. And due to the majority voting system in place in Great Britain, the advance of Reform UK could cause enormous damage to the Tories. Because in all 650 constituencies, the candidate with the most votes wins, all other votes are lost. And Reform UK could therefore split the vote to the right of the centre in many constituencies and thus ensure that Tory candidates lose. Some analysts in Britain are already wondering whether Rishi Sunak's party could be heading for a similar crushing defeat as the Progressive Conservative Party in Canada in 1993, which, despite being in power since 1984, was only able to hold on to 2 of its 169 seats, despite receiving 16% of the vote. In view of the looming fiasco in the upcoming elections, which are expected in the second half of the year, Downing Street is apparently fearing a wave of defections from Tory MPs to Reform UK. Lee Anderson kicked things off at the beginning of last week. Sunak had recently expelled the eloquent Tory MP, who was even deputy party leader until the beginning of the year, and he expelled them from the Conservative group and from the party because of Islamophobic statements about London Mayor Sadiq Khan. And Anderson retaliated by joining Reform UK. The ongoing doom and gloom could lead to other Conservative MPs following Anderson's example. At least 65 Conservative MPs have so far said they will not stand again in the upcoming general election. Others may try to avoid a likely loss of their seats by switching parties. The right wing of the Tories has moved so far to the right in recent years that some MPs don't have to make any major adjustments in that case. The leader of Reform UK, the entrepreneur Richard Tice, was himself a member of the Tories until 2019. The right-wing populist Nigel Farage, who helped initiate the Brexit referendum in 2016, was involved in the founding of the party at the end of 2018 as the Brexit Party. At the beginning of 2020, the party renamed itself Reform UK. Farage relinquished the chairmanship in March 21 and is now honorary chairman. The party is tailor-made for voters on the right. It represents anti-immigrant positions and wants to stop the energy transition and instead produce more oil and gas. Woke ideologies should disappear from classrooms and the license fee should be abolished. The party slogan could hardly be more cliché. Let's make Britain great. They could have used the again as well. Then it's so close to Trump that everybody will recognize that. But nevertheless, if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.